One of the big debates over Planned Parenthood shooter is this domestic terrorism. And I really don't see the difference between a religious fanatic seeing a propaganda video online and shooting up an abortion clinic, or what happened in France. Peter, what's the difference between that terror and this terror outside of this was a white guy?
Well, you just hit the thing there. I mean, it was a white guy. I think the idea that people who vote can't be terrorists and people who don't vote can be terrorists has a lot to do with this. We can see that in the fact that none of the Republican candidates came out immediately after the shooting condemning it. I mean, Hillary and Bernie Sanders were immediately in the media condemning what happened there. I don't know if any of the Republican candidates actually got around to saying something wimpy at a later date, but their silence initially was noted. Angry white people form a core block of voters for them, people who hate Planned Parenthood and who may not commit violence themselves, but certainly don't weep knowing it was committed. Again, do the thought experiment. If there was a huge voting bloc in the United States of terrorists, I suspect you would find that many politicians would have far less negative things to say about terrorists. They might just keep their mouths shut when these things happen. The other side of this, in addition to that fairly cynical look at politics, is also and I'm glad Josh is not armed at this point in time because he might take a shot at me for that. But I mean, the other thing is the dual message our government likes to send to us about terrorism. On one hand, we are constantly whipped into a fear frenzy. ISIS is hiding out at the ANP. They're behind, they're under the bed, whatever. But on the other hand, look, the government's keeping you safe. Nothing has happened. There hasn't been a 9/11 for over 14 years. So that duality that the government uses to manipulate people is a very powerful tool. If, in fact, there were terrorist incidents happening in the United States, whether they're done by angry white people or angry radical Muslim people, that would take away one portion of the whole messaging that the government likes to put out, that they're keeping us safe. And it justifies all the draconian measures. So I suspect that also comes into play about why government figures and their running dogs in the media are just not very quick to slap the label terrorism on anything that is outside of the narrative, if you will.
Well, I mean, just on.
See,
Go ahead, Josh.
I was just going to say that I kind of want to disagree with that, at least about abortion, because now I did a completely unscientific bit of research amongst my friends on social media. But so-called pro-life person who thinks that shooting up the Planned Parenthood clinic was a worse crime, a worse moral crime than abortion itself. So, these politicians who, I mean, certainly some are cynically supporting pro-life causes because they want the votes, but others, and I think, one that I can think of immediately is Rick Santorum. I mean, whatever he is a true believer in his beliefs. So I think for them it's really an issue that, people who are not anti-abortion see it as an issue about whether or not a woman has a right to have the only person weighing in on a medical procedure. The other side, the pro-life side, they're trying to stop baby murder. I mean, so that Ted Cruz said it, or not Ted Cruz, Eric Erickson, a conservative blogger, said today, Planned Parenthood should be thankful that it doesn't happen more often. And in a way, I see his point, not that they should be thankful, but that, if you think there's a group out there that is legally murdering children, who among us wouldn't try to do something to stop it? And so for them, I think it's the rhetoric of it, saying abortion is murder, calling people abortionists, and just, I think it's a very real feeling. It's not misplaced. It's actual They want to save these baby angels from their whore mothers. And I think that is what inspires them to do violence, whether it's arson, trying to kill abortion doctors, or this guy in Colorado Springs. So I think that as far as issues go, this is as real as it gets. Like, there's never going to be compromise on this.
Yeah, that's actually what I wanted to go into next was, what is the difference between someone like Rick Santorum, Carly Fiori, and Mike Huckabee, or even, they're candidates, whatever. They're like, the real bad stuff is on, like, conservative talk radio. It's on the internet. Eric, what's the difference between rhetoric like that and rhetoric you see in ISIS propaganda videos or radicalized imams?
I don't think there's anything different. Just the one towards the abortion topic is more accepted because seen as a social issue. We're talking about the idea of baby. Whereas when we look at the Middle East and ISIS, we see the Middle Eastern man. That's something that's a lot easier for us to get angry and going into the cause against. Whereas an issue like abortion splits our society. So, rest on that. But before I wanted to interject in the previous conversation, but unfortunately, the other two guys took the spotlight a little long. But you were asking if we thought it was domestic terrorism. So, I know what the definition of terrorism, but I punched it on Google, and word for word, the use of violence and intimidation in the pursuit of political aims. And in the case of Robert Louis Deere, violence, killing people, intimidation, guns, political aims, abortion, strikes.
Well, that's the other thing is before a lot of the mass shootings we saw were mentally ill, young kids. We're seeing a rise in politically motivated shooting. Dylan Roof wrote a lot about, black people raping white women and apartheid. And, these aren't things a young kid just comes up with on his own.
Don't forget the guy in, I can't remember where it was. Was it Tennessee? The guy who shot up the theater or attacked the theater because of the Amy Schumer movie.
Louisiana.
Because he didn't think it was. In Louisiana, yeah. He was politically motivated as well. I forget, again, whatever madness it was, but I don't think he liked ladies dirty talking on the moving picture screen.
Yeah, just a week before the Planned Parenthood shooting, we saw three guys roll up to a Black Lives Matter protest in Minneapolis and shoot 5 people. Thankfully no one died, and that's why that probably didn't get as much coverage as it should have. But, what is the difference? Why aren't we doing anything about these groups like Stormfront or these hardline, crazy, radicalized media that these people seem to be acting on? Eric?
It's not a popular topic, unfortunately. When we're looking, like I was saying before, when we're looking between ISIS or domestic terrorism, international terrorism always takes the cake because people still remember 9/11, and that scares people. Domestic terrorism is less scary because, as odd as it sounds, Robert Louis Deere is a lot more common looking compared to an ISIS fighter with I forget what it's called on his head, and, all the battle AK-47. That's a lot more scary looking to us on the television than a crazy picture of Robert Louis.
Peter, how can we stop the radicalization of young Christian men?
I think, the ideas are not all that different. You've got, then you talk about with Islamic radicalization or any kind of radicalization. You have to understand what causes people to become so dispossessed of society that they're willing to act in such a violent way and almost in a random sense of violence. Part of that is, in fact, messaging. We have to step away from the idea that there's no harm being done by a lot of the right-wing propagandists who are sort of saying, yeah, violence is bad, wink, wink, and basically quietly endorsing the fact that that these killers exist on a spectrum. There's people over here who will quietly donate a small amount of money to a so-called pro-life group, and then over here, there's guys who will take an AK out and shoot up a Planned Parenthood. We need to simply stop accepting that is, again, part of our society, and that the messaging that those people are receiving, oftentimes with a wink and a nudge from very highest levels of government. really is detrimental to our nation. That said, scary foreigners win every time over scary neighbors. You can't go wrong in the United States trying to whip up fear and frenzy over some kind of scary foreigner. I actually did a piece quite a while ago on Latest where I compared some World War II anti-Japanese propaganda to some current anti-ISIS propaganda. And you really, in many senses, just changed some of the words around. And even then, you didn't have to do very much of that. The words fanatic, barbaric came up. The Japanese beheaded a small number of American prisoners, and that was featured very heavily in all the anti-Japanese propaganda. The messaging has not changed. They just kind of switched the characters in and out. But scary foreigners are always good for that, particularly when you're running for something.
Josh, forget gun control, mentally ill people, all that for a second. How do we cut down on the amount of politically motivated shootings? I mean, we created hate crime laws, but like the critics of gun control laws say, gun law is not going to stop someone from breaking the murder law. Hate crime laws aren't going to stop people from killing people in the name of their political or religious beliefs.
I mean, that's a question that I think if we could answer, we would be the first in all of human history. I do think that we do, while still respecting the principles of the ideals of the First Amendment, free expression, shutting down Stormfront because it's a place where angry white people like to go and type the N-word over and over again. That's sort of against the idea or the ideal of free expression. It's not, you don't win by taking away all these other arguments. You win by making the better argument. And that's what I think we're not doing. I think that's what a lot of people are not doing. The greatest tragedy after 9/11 was not that. The greatest tragedy after 9/11 is that the outpouring of support that the U.S. saw in the wake of it for that month or 6 weeks was sort of also unprecedented in human history. Like it affected more than just Americans seeing these two giant symbols of America crumble to the ground and then people rushing into the smoke to try to save people like that. There was a moment there where we could have really done something. But instead, what happened is we went on and did exactly what Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda and now the so-called Islamic State, we did what they wanted us to do. We went to war, ginned up some of the population into being more receptive to racism. One of the stories I'm publishing today is Ben Carson was accidentally right when he said that the Syrian refugees coming in would be radicalized because of U.S. racism. That's completely possible,
Yeah, there was another politician who said that we can't let them into Texas because guns are too easy to get.
Oh God, I can't even tell what fucking caricature is anymore, Igor. I don't know.
But talking about places like Stormfront and those others, again, looking at what the United States has been doing in regards to terrorism, and let's be generous here and leave the First Amendment questions, which are significant, aside. But if any of us were to set up a pro-ISIS website, it wouldn't last very long, and there's a real good chance that we'd end up in jail for, aiding the enemy, if you will. I think we did a story recently about a kid blogger in Virginia who was reposting some alleged ISIS material, and he was arrested simply for retweeting things like that, ISIS. We have this wonderful catch-all category called conspiracy to commit terrorism, which is used to arrest people all the time. And essentially, conspiracy to commit terrorism seems to boil down to sort of thinking about it at almost any level. I think I'm going to build a dirty bomb in my apartment. I don't have any nuclear material, and I have no idea how to do any of that. But I'm thinking about it, and therefore subject to arrest for conspiracy. I think some of those same laws could be applied to our angry white male terrorists, for example. And some of those same laws could be applied to messaging that is designed specifically to incite violence, racial violence, or violence against the police. Go ahead and put up a website claiming that the police are murderers, that they kill babies, and we need to strike them down wherever they stand in Jesus' name. Go create that website and see how long things go smoothly. It's only we draw these lines in odd places, and then we wonder why things like the Planned Parenthood shooting take place.
Well, I guess that on the Stormfront thing, I wasn't saying we should shut down Stormfront. I'm not even saying that that it's created to incite racial violence.
It wouldn't be the worst thing that happened, but shit.
There's plenty of peaceful racists, but there are people who are looking to commit violence on there.